Hi there, this week we are putting a third rose on my rose composition. Now you might be saying to me, oh, we've done roses, but there's always something new to learn. And on this one, due to much request, I've enlarged the flower, because a lot of people have been asking, why do you enlarge? Can we see an enlarged painting? Can you do a big wash? Mainly from my Instagram posts. So I thought, let's do a large rose. So we've got Walter's rose underneath here, and we've got the other rose, High Hopes, underneath there. So this is another High Hopes, but fully blown, and it's twice the size of the actual flower. So it's twice the width. And blowing something up, it actually gives you a lot more fun with the watercolour. We've done really big petals before, but this one is sort of a nice comfortable size if you're building up to those big washes. So this will sort of be, if you haven't done enlarged paintings, this will be a nice introduction for you. Now obviously pink is quite a tricky colour to do, but we'll just talk through all the different processes and mixes. And what I've done on my drawing is I've made it really, really pale. You'll remember from last time we did pink flowers. We've done a few now. I promise we won't do any for a while. So the reason I've made that pencil very, very light is because pink makes pencil permanent, and so we want to keep it as light as possible. But what I have kept, if I can speak properly in a minute, is I've kept a little trace of the shadow lines. Now when you're tracing from a photograph, if that's what you're going to do, you need to mark out those shadow lines, but make sure they're really, really delicate, so that when you're putting the first wash on, they're not going to be too evident. Right, so one of the things I wanted to do before I started was just talk about masking fluid. Masking fluid is the bane of my life. It's one of those things where I think I found the perfect masking fluid and then things go wrong. So the one I'm using at the moment is Talens, and this is a grey masking fluid, and I haven't had any problems, touch wood, so far with this make. So we'll go with that. And I'm using a fine liner, which I've decided to dedicate to masking fluid. And I'm just going to mark out the little hole in the petal here, and a couple of little holes over here. Normally with an enlarged painting you can work around these, but because it is an enlarged painting and we're doing really big washes, it's quite nice not to have to fiddle and work around little marks or holes. So you can put those on, as long as we don't work in that area just at the moment. I'm going to plop one up here as well. As long as we don't work on those petals, we should be fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the centre of the flower, which I don't normally do, but I want to talk about something which I have mentioned on one of the other projects, but if you're new to us or you've just decided just to do flowers, you might have missed it. And what I've done is I've made a little hole in a piece of paper here as a window, really. It's a little window, and you can lay it over the photograph and you can see the tone of the area that you want to paint. And you can do this on live flowers as well. It's very easy to do. You make a small hole in a piece of paper and just offer it up to the live flower. And what's quite nice is you can just mark your paint next to it to see if you've matched the colour, which we'll do in just a moment once we've mixed something up. So be careful not to jog that masking fluid, and don't paint over the masking fluid until it's completely dry. And one of the things that masking fluid is for is to protect the paper so it will stay white. It's very important, super important, that you don't put it onto damp or wet paper. So it's got to go onto dry paper. Your brush needs to be cleaned very thoroughly quickly afterwards, or if you've got like a little sort of ink marking tool or something like that. Lots of people use the wrong end of the brush as well. I've done that in the past, because it will kill the brush if you're not careful. There's all kinds of little tricks that people talk about putting washing up liquid on the brush and what have you. I think if you've got a brush that you're prepared to lose, then that's okay, but you can use it and use it again. So even though the masking fluid will make it no good for painting, it will still be good for applying masking fluid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up my colours now. Oops, got flying brushes over there. And I'm going to mix up I'm just going to put that in there. I'm going to mix up some pink in a old saucer because I want to mix up a really strong mix. And I've put some Rose Madder Lake there, a big squodge of it there, and just mixing up a nice big puddle. And I'm going to have a reservoir pink. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to move that to one side, and I'm going to mix into that some lemon, just a little bit. Just to make a sort of warm, peachy pink. Just little tiny bits of lemon in there, and then I'm going to add just a tiny bit of cobalt blue. Just catch it on the corner of your brush there and add the smallest amount, really just very careful. You just want a hint of blue in there. And then I'm going to plop that onto my little window. Right next door to the window there. It's really important that you put it next door to the window because it's got to sit next to the colour you're trying to match. So I'm going to see how that looks next to my photograph. It could be a little bit more yellow, I think, so I'm going to add some more yellow to that. I might add some darker yellow. I'm going to add some Sennelier Yellow Deep. Add a little bit more. And just a tiny bit more blue. Now remember, when you're mixing up a colour to match, I'm painting straight onto dry paper, so you'll need it quite thick so that and dark, so that when you put it onto the water it doesn't fade away. So I've added more yellow, Sennelier Yellow Deep, some more cobalt blue, and I'm going to put that on the other side. And I think a couple of layers of that will be pretty good. I don't want to go really thick. If you go really thick, then you lose that light that you want on watercolour. So it's a sort of delicate balance between the right tone, but not necessarily the density that you get on a photograph. Remember, it is a flower and we want it to look like the light's shining through. So that's quite nice. We've got our little window helping us mix that colour. I've got a good reservoir, and I'm going to use a lot of that throughout the photograph, just sort of using it for the darker shadows around the centre. So I've got that ready, and before I do that I want to mix up on my, put my mixing brush over there now, take some of that colour onto my palette, and I'm going to mix in some more lemon and some Opera Rose. Now I've got my Opera Rose slab over here, which I absolutely love, but if you've got some fresh Opera Rose you can put it out on your palette. Always remember, Opera Rose sort of dries fairly brittle and hard, so it's difficult to get it to moisten. So my lovely slab of pink that I've got over here is really easy to get the colour off. So I'm going to mix a little bit of that in there. And this is for the all the lovely little fluffy bits in the middle of the flower. I know I should know what they are. So we're going to put in the pollen part of the flower there. We've got a little shape here that we're going to just colour in, and then we'll put our lovely deep pink around that. And what I'll do is I'll lift out a little bit of light for the stamen. So I want that colour for that little monkey, and then I want some slightly more yellowy pink for where the stamen are. So I've gone with a little bit of lemon and some of the mixture in the middle. So we've got a slightly sort of orangey colour, and that's going to be for the stamen part of the area. And it's sort of, because it's nice and shady in there and slightly out of focus, we're going to make it a little bit crisper, but we're going to sort of give it that sort of busy, intriguing centre, and not worry too much about definition at the moment. It's just going to be a nice sort of detailed, cavey, busy area. It'll make sense in a minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a brush suitable for that centrepiece, and I'm going to use a size 4. So I've got a size 4 synthetic, and we're going to first of all just paint on, oh, not that puddle, this puddle. Just going to paint on this little area in here. Now I'm doing it wet on dry. And what we're going to do is paint in a little bit of the detail and then glaze over it when it's dry. It's another technique that I like to use sometimes, especially if I'm being a little bit more painterly. A little bit of that colour on and just hoover out some light. So you're just using a damp brush now, putting the colour on and just lifting out a little bit of light here and there. And I'm going to use the same colour just to put in some little dark areas where the petals have folded in around. Just use your brush just to draw them in. And the nice thing about going wet on dry, which is wet paint onto dry paper, is that you get that deeper tone, so nothing's being watered down. We're going to get the tone of what we're putting on. If this is all a bit too vague for you, you could have a look at the roses in the garden, or have a look at images of roses online if you want, and decipher what bits are what and put a little bit more detail on. So what I'm doing here is I'm just softening the edge of those little areas that I've painted in, just to give it a bit more of a natural hazy look in there, just where that darkness softens up into the petal. And now I'm going to paint in a little bit of the orangey colour. Oop, just water it down a tad. So I'm going to put that across this corner here, through there. So it'll create this negative shape in here, this is like right inside the flower. It's all going to dry fairly quickly because it's quite a small area, and you want to work fairly quickly because you've got to lift out some little bits of light here and there. And again, just soften the edge there. It's all quite painterly in here, quite enjoy doing this sort of thing. Now you've got to wait for that to dry just for a second, because we won't be able to lift out without it all filling in again. So I'm just going to give it a moment, and then I'm just going to wipe through just to reveal those little stamen filaments, just slightly lighter in there. So use the tip of your brush and just wipe through, not a wet brush. If it was a wet brush, all the water would land in there and you'll have cauliflowers galore. So I'm just going to wipe, it should lift off quite nicely. So just lift away, and if there's any other little areas that you can lift out as well, some other little curls of juvenile petals down there. Another little stamen filament coming through there. If nothing happens, you sometimes have to wipe 2 or 3 times to get a little bit of lift. Don't panic, just keep doing it. And if worse comes to worse, you can always use your eradicator and lift out a little bit of light, so don't panic. Just pushing away any overlapping paint there, just so I don't get a hard edge on that centerpiece. Tiny little dot in the middle there. I'm just going to check and see how my colour dried over there. It's a little bit red. I want it a bit more yellow, so before I put that colour on, I'm going to add some more Sennelier Yellow Deep. I'm going to pick up a good brush load. There we go. That's going to be my deep pink reservoir. So give this a little while to dry, and while that's drying we'll have a little look at where we can use that colour elsewhere. So I think there's a nice petal down here that has no masking fluid on it, and it goes all the way around and through there. So this one I've noticed that I've got a line here which looks like another petal, and actually it's just a little fold. So I'm just going to lighten that just with my pencil eraser, rotary eraser I should say. So here we've got this lovely rich, this lovely dark pink in here for shadow, and then it goes into the pink petal, which is quite an interesting thing to do. So what I want to do is I want to do the pink petal first and then put on the shadow. So let's mix up a very pale pink. So I'm going to use Rose Madder Lake and just water that all the way down. I'm just going to try that on a piece of paper and offer it up to my flowers. Pretty good colour actually. There's a hint of blue in there, so I'm just got a tiny little bit of cobalt blue in there. Mix up enough to do the whole thing. And then we've got this little shadow over here, so we can mix that in a minute as well, but we need the base to be dry. So when you're doing a big petal, nice big brush, so I've got my number 6 brush, my number 6 synthetic, and what I'm going to do is put a lovely big reservoir in the middle there. And pull that reservoir out into all the shapes, the negative shapes, and up to the edge, and bring it right up to the pale pencil edge. I need to talk to Mr. Moulin du Roi because I'm missing the heavy paper so much, and it's just so annoying that it's been discontinued. So I just got used to it. Hey ho. So I'm going to take that over there, so you can just see that little line there as well where I've had the shadow depicted, and then there's some little folds in there and a little bit of petal from behind poking through. We'll put that all in the same wash and then we can define it afterwards. So you want a nice glaze, make sure it's nice and even all over. Clean water. There's a little bit of pink in this water, but it's not enough to worry about. And then with a damp brush, just make sure there's no puddles. Just hoover up. And then give your colour a little stir. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop it along this edge here, because I've got a nice little deepening along the edge. I'm going to let that move in on its own. And then through the middle there. What you want to do is try and keep that light that we want for this pink petal. You don't want it to go too dark. If you feel like you're chasing a puddle, just dab your brush on the dab pad to take the excess paint away, and that gives you a little bit more control. So the colour we're putting on is almost the lightest tone of the petal. I'm not putting on those dark pinks yet. And where I'm keeping it really light through there is just where the petal curls. And then I'm going to go a little bit darker in here. That's where the shadow's going to go in a minute. So what we'll do is we'll get this nicely settled and leave it to dry, and then we'll come back and put that lovely rich shadow on, by which time that middle will be dry and we can erase the pencil. It's very important to get rid of the pencil as early as you can when you're painting pink flowers. You could be pinking pink flowers, I don't know. So as that's settling, you can just squint your eyes and see if there's any light that needs hoovering out. Just hoover out. And that just means using your brush as a sponge and sort of mopping it up. A few people have said, oh, the synthetics don't mop up as well. You just got to get into the habit of drying it a little bit more than a sable brush, and it works just as well. And if it didn't, I wouldn't be using it, because it's one of those things where you really do need your tools to help you. And I haven't had any problems. It's just a little bit of acclimatising. I loved them. So we've got a little bit of time. Just as it's settling, you can pick up some of that pink that we mixed for the middle area for some of the detail. You can just drop that in on the areas that are just a little bit darker. So just on the edges there, just where there's a little bit more pink coming in. You can have a little bit of Rose Madder that's a bit stronger and just drop it very, very lightly. Just let it splurge in, but really, really lightly. It just gives that lovely feeling of that petal curling over. So a little bit down here as well. And all the time this is wet, you'll get these lovely sort of soft elements to the paint, you know, it's just blurring nicely. Just while your brush is running out, you can flick through very lightly just to get a little bit of that texture on the petal. Now if it comes out as a hard line like that, don't do it, because it means that your glaze has dried and you'll end up with lots of hard lines everywhere. It's only while it's nice and soft can you get away with these nice little flicks of extra colour. And I was teaching a really lovely group of real beginners the other day, and we were doing some petals, and the enthusiasm was intoxicating. You know, once they realised they could do it, it was quite a thrill. So I hope that some of you have had that experience when you've been doing these projects, and if you haven't, then look forward to that moment when you do have that little bit of excitement, when you suddenly realise, I can do it. That's what it's all about. Okay, so we're fiddling while it's damp, which is fine, but I think actually we can leave that there to settle and dry. And what we'll do is we'll do exactly the same process over here. And as with all flowers, it's always better to work away from each petal that you've painted so that each one has a good chance to dry. So let's jump up here, do this one, and then we've got a couple of petals in the bank that we can then add the lovely strong shadows to. So off we go. So I've worked my way across. All I've done is I've done one more big petal and then just these little ones, exactly the same technique. Enjoy playing with the paint while it's still wet, while the glaze is still wet. Don't worry about putting everything in on the first glaze. The first glaze is really just to establish some light and dark, and if it's you know, a small area, just to give it a tone. So this area here where we've got these lovely deep shadows in here, we're not putting those on yet. All I did was just add in a little bit of pink on the edges there while it was still settling. So don't try and do too much, because then you confuse everything and make it difficult for yourself. But I've stopped and come back to you for this one here because a little bit more involved, and we're going to go over this masking fluid, and I just wanted to explain about that. So I'm going to mix up a slightly bigger puddle of the Rose Madder Lake, add a tiny little bit of blue to it so that we've got that ready, and then I'm going to have another little puddle over here with just Rose Madder on its own, but again watered down so we get the right shade of pink. So it's a little bit stronger than the pink on the paper, just to give you a safety net for drying. And then we need a little bit of orange, warm yellowy orange, for just where the petal comes in here and tucks in. So I'm going to pick up some lemon, and if you've still got it on your palette, use a little bit of that orange that you mixed up earlier and just mix it in with that lemon. It's mainly lemon with just a little hint of orange in it. Okay, let's put our glaze on, and this is completely dry now, this masking fluid, so you just put the water straight over the top. You don't do anything to it, you just paint straight over, and do exactly the same, putting on your big glaze. I can just about make out the little lines for the shadows that I need on here, just smaller ones. But this one's quite a nice petal in that it's got some intriguing little sweeps of pink on it, and I just thought I'd walk you through it. I left this rose behind at my old house, having recently moved to the country. I now don't have that rose, but my very dear friend Gail has bought me 3 roses by way of compensation, and they're all pink, I'm sorry to say, but she knows me and she knows that I do like